Jennifer's fork clinked against her wine glass at exactly 9:30, demanding attention like the entitled princess she'd always been. Everyone, I'd like to make a toast to my dear mother-in-law Dorothy, who just shared the wonderful news that she's unemployed again after leaving her job for health reasons. Her voice dripped with mock sweetness as she made air quotes, her perfectly manicured nails catching the candlelight. How does it feel to be such a complete loser at your age? The entire dinner table went silent. My son Michael's colleagues and their wives stared at their plates, pretending they hadn't heard what she'd just said to a 64-year-old woman who'd buried her husband 2 years ago. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I set down my own wine glass with deliberate care, my hand steady as a surgeon's. "Well, Jennifer," I said, my voice calm as morning coffee. "I imagine it feels about the same as learning you'll be evicted from the house you've been living in rent-free for 3 years. I paused, letting that sink in before delivering the knockout punch. "Because as of tomorrow, you and Michael have 30 days to find your own place." Jennifer's face went from smug satisfaction to corpse white in under 2 seconds. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that this house, the one you've been redecorating with such enthusiasm, the one you've been calling ours in your little social media posts, belongs to me. Not Michael, me." I smiled sweetly, the same expression she'd worn moments before. "Funny thing about property records, they're public information." Michael dropped his fork with a clatter. "Mom, what? Oh, sweetheart, didn't your wife tell you? When you couldn't qualify for the mortgage because of your student loans, I bought this house outright. Cash. Your names aren't on the deed. They never have been." I stood up, smoothing my navy dress. "Jennifer, you've been particularly nasty tonight, so let me be crystal clear. You have exactly 30 days to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. I suggest you start looking for places you can actually afford on your part-time yoga instructor salary." Jennifer's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Around the table, Michael's colleagues were suddenly very interested in their dessert plates, though I could see the barely concealed smirks. Nobody liked Jennifer much. She had a talent for alienating people. "You can't just throw us out," she finally managed to stammer. "Actually, I can. It's called being a landlord, dear. Look it up." I gathered my purse and shawl. "Thank you for a lovely evening. Everyone, Michael, we'll talk tomorrow when you've had time to process this. Jennifer, I'd start checking apartment listings if I were you. The rental market's brutal this time of year." And with that, I walked out of my own dining room, leaving behind a woman who'd just learned that karma, much like good wine, was best served at exactly the right temperature. The next morning, I sat in my sunroom with coffee and the newspaper, waiting for the inevitable phone call. It came at 7:15, right on schedule. "Mom, what the hell happened last night?" Michael's voice was strained, exhausted. I could picture him pacing the kitchen of my house, running his hands through his hair the way he'd done since he was 5 years old and in trouble. "Language, Michael. And I think you know exactly what happened. Your wife decided to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers, so I reminded her of her place in the world. You can't kick us out of our home. It's not your home, sweetheart. It never was." I set down my coffee cup with deliberate calm. "Do you remember 3 years ago when you and Jennifer were looking at houses? You were so excited about that little Tudor on Maple Street, but the bank wouldn't approve your mortgage because of your student loan debt." Silence on the other end of the line. "Do you remember how I offered to help? How I said I'd figure something out?" I continued. "What you don't know is that I didn't co-sign a loan, Michael. I bought this house outright, for cash, $420,000 from your father's life insurance policy. But the mortgage payments are what you pay me in rent. Every month for 3 years, you've been paying me rent, not a bank. The house is mine, Michael. It's always been mine." I let that sink in for a moment. I put it in my name only because I wanted to protect my investment. Smart decision, as it turns out. "Why didn't you tell us?" There was something in his voice, not anger, but genuine confusion. My son, for all his faults, wasn't cruel like his wife. He was just weak, and weakness could be forgiven. Cruelty could not. "Because I wanted you to feel like you were standing on your own 2 feet. I wanted you to have dignity, pride in your accomplishments. Your father and I always said we'd help you kids without making you feel helpless. I paused. But dignity and pride are earned, Michael. They can't be given, and they certainly can't be bought. Jennifer says you're being vindictive. Jennifer says a lot of things. Most of them are about as valuable as her yoga certifications. I let the sarcasm drip just a little. Michael needed to hear it, even if he wasn't ready to accept it yet. She's my wife, Mom. Yes, she is. And I'm your mother. But this isn't about choosing sides, sweetheart. This is about respect, about basic human decency, about the fact that your wife thinks it's acceptable to call your 64-year-old mother a loser in front of a room full of people. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Michael spoke again, his voice was smaller, younger. What do you want us to do? I want you to find your own place. Get qualified for your own mortgage. Build your own life without using me as a safety net you can abuse. I softened my tone, just a fraction. Michael, I love you. I always will. But I won't be treated like a doormat in my own house by a woman who's never worked a full day in her life. And if we can't find a place in 30 days, then you'll figure it out. You're 35 years old, Michael. It's time to act like it. Jennifer showed up at my door at 2 o'clock the next afternoon, dressed in designer athleisure and carrying a bouquet of grocery store flowers. The peace offering routine. I'd seen it before. Dorothy, we need to talk. She pushed past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation, her yoga-toned body moving with the confident swagger of someone who'd never faced real consequences for her actions. By all means, make yourself comfortable in my house, I said, closing the door behind her. She set the flowers on the entrance table and turned to face me, her expression a practiced blend of remorse and determination. I want to apologize for last night. I was out of line. Yes, you were. I've been under a lot of stress lately. My studio's not doing well, and with the holidays and everything, she let the excuse hang in the air like a bad smell. Your yoga studio that's been launching for 2 years now? I raised an eyebrow. The one that's never actually had any paying clients? Jennifer's perfect composure cracked just a little. It takes time to build a client base. I'm sure it does. Tell me, how much money have you and Michael invested in this business venture of yours? Ballpark figure. I don't see how that's relevant. Humor me. She shifted uncomfortably, her designer sneakers squeaking against the hardwood floor. Maybe 15,000. For equipment, marketing, insurance? I nodded thoughtfully. 15,000. On a business that generates no income, while living rent-free in a house worth $500,000. I walked past her toward the kitchen, forcing her to follow me like a supplicant. Jennifer, do you know what I did for a living before I retired? You were a bookkeeper or something. I was a certified financial investigator for the IRS for 32 years. I specialized in tracking fraudulent business expenses and unreported income. I filled the kettle with water, my movements deliberate and calm. So, when you tell me your yoga studio has no paying clients, I find that curious. Because according to your social media posts, you've been teaching private sessions at some very expensive houses in some very wealthy neighborhoods. The color drained from Jennifer's face. Those are just friends helping me practice. Friends who pay you in cash. Off the books, unreported income. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. How much cash, Jennifer? Rough estimate. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I think you've been running a very nice little under-the-table business, teaching yoga to bored housewives who pay premium rates for the convenience of not having to drive to a studio. I think you've been making quite a bit of money, actually. You're just not reporting it. Jennifer's hands were shaking now. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Your phone has GPS tracking. Your car has GPS tracking. I have 32 years of experience tracking down tax evaders, and you have the technological sophistication of a teenager. I smiled pleasantly. Plus, your clients post about their sessions on their own social media accounts. They tag you, Jennifer. They thank you by name. They even mention how much they love their private instructor. She sank into one of my kitchen chairs, all pretense abandoned. What do you want? I want you to understand that I'm not some helpless old woman you can push around. I'm not your doormat, and I'm not your meal ticket. I poured hot water over tea bags, the domestic gesture at odds with the steel in my voice. I want you to know that if you ever speak to me the way you did last night again, I won't just kick you out of my house. I'll report your unreported income to the IRS. With documentation. You wouldn't. Try me. Michael appeared at my door that evening, alone. His face was drawn, exhausted, like a man who'd spent the day having very difficult conversations. Jennifer told me about your conversation today. He slumped into the living room chair his father used to occupy, looking older than his 35 years. Did she tell you about her cash business? She said you're threatening to report her to the IRS over a few yoga lessons. I settled into my own chair, studying my son's face. A few yoga lessons that generate unreported income is tax evasion, Michael. It's not a hobby when you're charging $75 an hour. His head snapped up. $75 an hour? You didn't know? I kept my voice gentle. No point in twisting the knife. Michael was finally starting to see what his wife really was. She's been teaching 6 to 8 private sessions a week for the past year. That's close to $24,000 in unreported income. Michael was quiet for a long time, doing the math in his head. She told me she was barely making anything, that the business was failing. The business she declared on her taxes is failing. The business she's actually running is quite successful. I reached for my tea, giving him time to process. Michael, when was the last time you saw Jennifer's bank account? We have separate accounts. She said it was better for building her business credit. Separate accounts. Of course. I was starting to understand the whole picture now, and it was uglier than I'd thought. Sweetheart, sit down. We need to talk about a few things. For the next hour, I walked my son through the reality of his marriage, the hidden income, the tax evasion, the fact that he'd been living on his teacher's salary while his wife squirreled away cash in accounts he didn't know about. I feel like an idiot, he said finally. You're not an idiot. You're trusting. There's a difference. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But Michael, you need to understand that this isn't just about money. This is about fundamental dishonesty. Your wife has been lying to you about her income for over a year. What should I do? That's not for me to decide. You're a grown man. I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. But whatever you decide, you have 26 days to find a new place to live. That deadline doesn't change. And if Jennifer and I work things out? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was still hoping for a fairy tale ending, still believing that love could conquer all. Maybe it could. But not with Jennifer. Then you work them out in your own house, with your own mortgage, using your own money and hers, all of it, reported to the proper authorities. I kissed his forehead the way I had when he was small, and the world was simpler. 26 days, Michael, I mean it. 3 days later, Jennifer made her second mistake. She brought reinforcements. I was in my garden, deadheading the last of the winter roses, when a black BMW pulled into my driveway. Jennifer stepped out, followed by an older woman in an expensive suit who walked with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting her way. Dorothy, this is my mother, Patricia Caldwell, Jennifer announced, as if she was introducing royalty. Patricia Caldwell was everything Jennifer aspired to be. Perfectly groomed, designer everything, and radiating the kind of entitlement that comes from never having been told no. She looked at my modest ranch house the way someone might look at a bug under a microscope. Mrs. Patterson, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Her voice had the crisp authority of someone used to managing lesser people. Jennifer has explained the situation, and frankly, I think you're being unreasonable. I set down my gardening shears and pulled off my gloves, taking my time. And what situation would that be, Mrs. Caldwell? This eviction nonsense. Jennifer and Michael have been living here for 3 years. They have rights. They have the rights of tenants whose lease I'm choosing not to renew. Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. Actually, they have the rights of family members who've been contributing to this household for years. Jennifer has been maintaining this property, improving it, investing her time and energy into making it a home. Ah, so that was the angle they were trying. Sweat equity, property improvements. A claim that Jennifer had somehow earned partial ownership through her contributions. Interesting theory, I said. Tell me, Mrs. Caldwell, what exactly has Jennifer contributed to this household? She's been managing the household expenses, coordinating maintenance, overseeing renovations. With whose money? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Patricia's confident smile faltered just a fraction. I'm not sure I understand. Every renovation, every improvement, every maintenance call has been paid for with my money, Mrs. Caldwell. Jennifer hasn't contributed a single dollar to this household in 3 years. She's been playing house with someone else's wallet. She's been providing services, the same services any renter might provide. Taking care of the property they live in, hardly grounds for ownership rights. Patricia's facade was starting to crack. She'd come here expecting to intimidate a lonely old widow. Instead, she was facing someone who'd spent 3 decades dealing with people far more sophisticated than her daughter. Furthermore, I continued, my voice pleasant as Sunday morning, I'm curious about Jennifer's business records. Has she been reporting all her income to you, Mrs. Caldwell? When you do her taxes, and I assume you do, given your concern for her financial affairs, do you include the cash payments from her private yoga sessions? Jennifer went white. Patricia looked confused. What cash payments? I smiled sweetly. Perhaps you should ask your daughter about her very successful under-the-table business. I'm sure the IRS would be fascinated to learn about it too. Patricia turned to Jennifer, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. What is she talking about? It's nothing, Mom. Just a few private lessons. A few private lessons that generate about $2,000 a month in unreported income, I clarified helpfully. But I'm sure it was just an oversight. These things happen. The silence that followed was beautiful. Mother and daughter, caught in their own web of lies and tax evasion. Patricia Caldwell, who'd come here to intimidate me, was suddenly faced with the possibility that her daughter was a criminal. I think this conversation is over, Patricia said finally. I think you're right, I agreed. 23 days, Jennifer, don't forget. The revelation came on a Tuesday afternoon, wrapped in the mundane package of a misdirected text message. I was having coffee with my neighbor Helen when my phone buzzed with a notification. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen, but instead of calling, she'd sent a text meant for someone else entirely. Can't wait to see you tonight. Michael's working late again, and the old bat will be asleep by 9. We'll have the whole house to ourselves. Wear that cologne I like. J. Helen looked over my shoulder as I read it, her eyes widening behind her reading glasses. Well, she said dryly, that's interesting. Interesting was one word for it. I had others, but they weren't suitable for polite company. I screenshotted the message, then sent a reply. I think you meant to send this to someone else, Jennifer. Might want to be more careful with your phone. The response came within seconds. Oh God, Dorothy, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Come home, now. 20 minutes later, Jennifer burst through my front door, her face flushed with panic and exertion. She'd clearly run the entire way from wherever she'd been. Dorothy, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're having an affair. I set my phone on the coffee table, the screenshot still glowing on the screen. The question is, does Michael know? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're cheating on my son in my house while he's working double shifts to pay for your lifestyle. I stood up, every inch of my 5'4" frame radiating fury. How long? It doesn't matter. How long, Jennifer? 8 months, she whispered. 8 months. While Michael worked extra hours to pay for her fake yoga business, while he stressed about money and their future, while he defended her to me over and over again. Who is he? You don't know him. Try me. Jennifer's face crumpled. She knew she was caught, knew there was no way out of this one. His name is Marcus. Marcus Davidson. He owns a construction company. The name meant nothing to me then, but I filed it away for future reference. In my experience, men who cheated with married women usually had their own complications. Does his wife know? Jennifer's silence was answer enough. I see. So you're not just destroying my son's marriage, you're destroying someone else's too. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What's his wife's name, Jennifer? Dorothy, please. What's her name? Sarah. Sarah Davidson. But you can't what? Can't tell her that her husband is sleeping with a married woman in someone else's house? Can't inform her that her marriage is a lie? I looked at Jennifer with all the disgust I felt. You have no right to ask me for anything, Jennifer. None at all. If you tell Sarah, it'll destroy 2 families. You already destroyed 2 families. I'm just evening the score. I paused, considering my options. But I'm going to give you a choice. You can tell Michael about the affair yourself, tonight, and end this charade of a marriage with some dignity. Or I can tell him, along with his father-in-law, your mother, and Mrs. Davidson. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you an opportunity to do the right thing for once in your miserable life. I walked to the front door and opened it. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Either way, Michael finds out the truth. The only question is whether it comes from you or from me. Jennifer stood frozen in my living room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Oh, and Jennifer? Pack your bags tonight. Affair or no affair, you're still out in 20 days. This just makes it easier for everyone involved. After she left, I sat in my father's old chair and finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what I'd discovered. My son, my gentle, trusting son, was married to a woman who was stealing from the government, lying about her income, and cheating on him in the house I'd bought to give them a fresh start. Some people, I realized, didn't deserve fresh starts. Some people deserved exactly what they got. Michael's truck pulled into the driveway at 11:30 that night, earlier than usual. Through my bedroom window, I watched him sit in the cab for several minutes, before finally climbing out and walking to the front door with the heavy steps of a man carrying an enormous burden. I'd been expecting this conversation since Jennifer left that afternoon. The only question was whether she'd found the courage to tell him herself, or if she'd tried to spin some alternate version of events. The soft knock on my bedroom door told me everything I needed to know. Mom, are you awake? Come in. Sweetheart. Michael looked like he'd aged 10 years in 8 hours. His teacher clothes were wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes held the shell-shocked expression of someone whose world had just imploded. She told me about Marcus, he said without preamble, sinking into the reading chair beside my bed. I'm sorry you had to hear it from her. Are you? Because Jennifer seems to think you orchestrated this whole thing, that you've been looking for ways to break us up since day one. I studied my son's face in the lamplight. Do you believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. He rubbed his face with both hands. 8 months, Mom. She's been lying to me for 8 months. About the money, about the business, about everything. I know. How did you know? About the affair, I mean. How long have you suspected? I showed him the screenshot of Jennifer's misdirected text. He read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. She was bringing him here, to our house, to your house. His voice was flat, emotionless. While I was working double shifts to try to save money for our future, she was bringing her boyfriend to the house you bought for us. Yes. Michael was quiet for a long time, staring at the phone screen. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What kind of person does that make me? That I never suspected, never noticed. It makes you trusting. It makes you a good man who expected his wife to be a good woman. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Michael, this isn't your fault. None of it. She says she wants to work it out, go to counseling, start fresh somewhere new. And what do you want? I want the last 3 years of my life back. I want to not feel like the biggest fool who ever lived. He looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I want to understand how I married someone I don't even know. People show us who they want us to see, Michael. Jennifer showed you someone she thought you'd love. The question now is whether you can love who she really is. Could you? If it were Dad? The question hit harder than I'd expected. No, I said honestly. I couldn't. But that's me, and this is your life. You have to make your own choice. Michael nodded slowly. 18 days left? 18 days. Good, because I don't think I can look at this house the same way anymore. Jennifer's mother returned 3 days later, this time with reinforcements of her own. I watched from my kitchen window as Patricia Caldwell climbed out of her BMW, followed by a man in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. Lawyer? I murmured to myself, not particularly surprised. I'd been expecting this escalation. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. Patricia stood on my porch with her companion, both wearing the grim expressions of people preparing for battle. Mrs. Patterson, this is Robert Caldwell, my ex-husband and Jennifer's father. He's also an attorney. Robert Caldwell was everything Patricia was. Polished, expensive, and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from winning most fights before they start. He looked at my house the way a general might survey a battlefield. Mrs. Patterson, I think we need to discuss this situation like reasonable adults. I'm perfectly reasonable, Mr. Caldwell. Your daughter, however, has been committing tax fraud and adultery in my house. I'm not sure how much more reasonable I can be than simply asking her to leave. His smile was sharp as broken glass. Adultery isn't grounds for eviction in this state. And as for the tax issues, those are between Jennifer and the IRS. You're absolutely right. But being my tenant is grounds for eviction, and I'm choosing not to renew her lease. There is no lease, Mrs. Patterson. Your son and daughter-in-law have been living here as family members, not tenants. They have legal rights that extend beyond simple landlord-tenant relationships. I poured myself coffee, taking my time. 20 years of dealing with attorneys in IRS investigations had taught me not to be intimidated by expensive suits and legal jargon. Rights such as adverse possession, sweat equity, implied partnership in property ownership based on contributions and improvements. He pulled documents from his briefcase. Jennifer has invested significant time and money into maintaining and improving this property. She has legal standing to claim partial ownership. The bluff was sophisticated. I'd give him that. The kind of legal intimidation that worked on people who didn't understand property law. Unfortunately for Robert Caldwell, I'd spent 32 years working with lawyers who were far more clever than he was. Interesting theory, I said pleasantly. Tell me, Mr. Caldwell, how much money has Jennifer invested in property improvements? Thousands of dollars over 3 years? From what source? Her yoga business? The one that exists only on paper? Or perhaps from her unreported cash income that she's been hiding from the IRS? Patricia and Robert exchanged glances. I could see them realizing that their daughter had given them incomplete information about her financial situation. Furthermore, I continued, adverse possession requires open, notorious, and hostile occupation of property. Jennifer has been living here with my permission, paying rent and acknowledging my ownership for 3 years. She has no legal claim to this property whatsoever. Robert's confident smile faltered slightly. The rent arrangement was informal. There's no documentation. Actually, there is. I walked to my desk drawer and pulled out a folder thick with bank records. 3 years of checks made out to Dorothy Patterson with rent, written in the memo line. 12 checks per year for 36 months. All deposited into my personal account. The silence that followed was deafening. Your daughter has been my tenant, Mr. Caldwell. Nothing more, nothing less. And now she's being evicted for cause. I handed him a formal eviction notice I'd prepared that morning. 15 days remaining. Helen Martinez knocked on my door the next morning with information that changed everything. Dorothy, I need to tell you something about your daughter-in-law. Helen's face was serious, troubled in a way I'd rarely seen. Yesterday, after those lawyers left, I made some phone calls. I invited her in for coffee, sensing that whatever she'd discovered was significant. My cousin Rosa works at the county clerk's office. I asked her to look up some records. Helen sat across from my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. Dorothy, Jennifer isn't just cheating on Michael. She's married to someone else. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? She married Marcus Davidson 6 months ago, in Vegas. There's a marriage certificate. My mind raced through the implications. But she's already married to Michael. That's the point. She committed bigamy. Jennifer is legally married to 2 men at the same time. Bigamy. A federal crime. Jennifer hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been committing a felony in my house for 6 months. Does Michael know? I thought you should tell him. But Dorothy, there's more. Helen's voice dropped to a whisper. Rosa also checked property records for Marcus Davidson. He's been transferring assets to Jennifer's name. Money, investments, even part ownership in his construction company. The picture was becoming clear, and it was uglier than I'd imagined. Jennifer hadn't just fallen into an affair. She'd orchestrated an elaborate scheme to drain money from 2 men simultaneously. My son, who was supporting her with his teacher's salary and my house, and Marcus Davidson, who was apparently transferring significant assets to her. She's been planning this, I said aloud, the pieces clicking into place. The separate bank accounts, the cash business, moving in with us rent-free. She's been building a nest egg with Michael's money and Marcus's assets. There's something else. Marcus Davidson is worth about $3 million. And he's been very generous with his new wife. Helen pulled out a folder of documents Rosa had printed. Property transfers, bank account changes, business partnerships, all dated within the past 6 months. All moving assets from Marcus Davidson to Jennifer Caldwell Davidson. What happened to Marcus's first wife? Sarah? Divorced. 4 months ago. He left her for Jennifer, transferred significant assets during the divorce proceedings, and married Jennifer immediately after the divorce was final. Helen shook her head. Dorothy, this woman is a professional. She didn't just destroy one family, she planned it all out. I stared at the documents spread across my kitchen table. Jennifer wasn't just a cheating wife or a tax evader. She was a criminal who'd committed bigamy, fraud, and systematically destroyed multiple families for financial gain. 12 days left, I said quietly. Are you going to tell Michael? I'm going to tell everyone who needs to know. The investigation that would ultimately destroy Jennifer's carefully constructed world had actually begun 3 weeks earlier, initiated by someone I'd never met. Detective Rachel Morrison of the county sheriff's office called me on Thursday afternoon, but not for the reason I expected. Mrs. Patterson, I understand you may have information regarding Jennifer Caldwell's activities. We're currently investigating financial fraud and bigamy charges filed by Sarah Davidson. It turned out that Sarah Davidson had been building a case against her ex-husband and Jennifer for months. When Marcus had suddenly divorced her and transferred significant assets, she'd hired a private investigator who'd uncovered the bigamy almost immediately. The bigamy charge is clear-cut, Detective Morrison explained during our meeting in my living room. Jennifer married your son in 2021 and married Marcus Davidson in Las Vegas 6 months ago without dissolving her first marriage. But we're also looking at mail fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. I provided everything I documented: the marriage certificates Helen had found, the hidden income evidence, the property transfers, the timeline of Jennifer's lies. Detective Morrison listened carefully, adding my evidence to what was clearly already a substantial case. Mrs. Patterson, we've been watching Jennifer for 2 weeks. We have financial records showing she's been operating what amounts to a marriage fraud scheme. Your family wasn't her first target. That revelation hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? We found evidence that Jennifer researched several families as potential targets over the past 18 months before she focused on your son. Wealthy widows with unmarried children, specifically. Your family fit a profile she was targeting systematically. The full scope of Jennifer's scheme was breathtaking in its cold calculation. She hadn't just stumbled into crime. She'd planned to systematically target families like mine for over a year before she ever met Michael. We'll be making arrests tomorrow, Detective Morrison said. Both Jennifer and Marcus are being charged with federal crimes. The evidence is overwhelming. That evening, I told Michael everything. About the investigation, about Jennifer's systematic targeting of our family, about the fact that their entire relationship had been a calculated fraud from the beginning. He listened in silence as I explained how Jennifer had researched our family, planned their meeting, orchestrated their relationship with the ultimate goal of gaining access to my wealth. When I finished, he sat quietly for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what he'd learned. So nothing was real, he said finally. Not one moment of our 3-year marriage was genuine. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Don't be. This actually makes it easier. He looked up at me with something that might have been relief. For months, I've been wondering what I did wrong, how I failed as a husband. Now I know I didn't fail. I was just the target of a professional criminal. 3 hours later, I watched from my front window as police cars surrounded my house. Jennifer's face was priceless when they put her in handcuffs, shock, disbelief, and finally the cold rage of someone whose carefully planned scheme had crumbled into dust. Michael arrived home as they were loading her into the patrol car. He stood in our driveway, watching his wife disappear into a police cruiser, his face a mask of emotions I couldn't begin to interpret. 9 days left, he said when he came inside. Take all the time you need. The house will be here when you're ready to figure out what comes next. The final truth came during Jennifer's sentencing hearing, delivered by federal prosecutor Amanda Chen in a courtroom packed with Jennifer's victims. Your Honor, the defendant operated a sophisticated marriage fraud scheme for over 2 years, targeting widowed women and their adult children across 3 states. The Patterson family was victim number 7. 7 families. Jennifer had destroyed 7 families before she got to mine. Michael and I sat in the gallery, listening as the prosecutor outlined the full scope of Jennifer's crimes: financial fraud, bigamy, tax evasion, identity theft. The charges went on for 20 minutes. The defendant would research wealthy families, identify vulnerabilities, and then systematically infiltrate them through romantic relationships with family members. She would establish financial dependency, gain access to family resources, and then commit bigamy with wealthier targets while maintaining her original marriages for continued financial support. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor explained how Jennifer had stolen over $2.3 million from her victims across 3 states. How she'd married 4 different men simultaneously at one point. How she'd left a trail of destroyed families and broken lives in her wake. The Patterson family was fortunate, the prosecutor continued. Mrs. Dorothy Patterson's background in financial investigation allowed her to recognize the fraud before the defendant could complete her scheme. Other families weren't so lucky. Jennifer sat at the defendant's table, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the confident woman who'd once called me a loser in my own dining room. When the judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison, she didn't even flinch. Marcus Davidson received 4 years for his role in the asset transfer fraud. Sarah Davidson was in the courtroom too, having recovered most of her stolen property through the federal investigation. After the sentencing, Sarah approached Michael and me in the hallway. "I wanted to thank you both," she said. "Your evidence helped convict them, but more than that, it helped me understand that what happened to my family wasn't personal. It was just business to Jennifer." "How are you doing?" I asked. "Better. I'm rebuilding, just like your son is." Sometimes, when someone shows you who they really are, the best thing you can do is believe them the first time. 3 months later, Michael moved into his own apartment across town. The house felt quiet without him, but it was a peaceful quiet. The silence of a storm finally passed. If you're watching this, I hope you remember that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who teach us the most important lessons. Jennifer taught me that kindness without boundaries is just weakness, and that protecting the people you love sometimes means being ruthless with the people who would harm them. As for me, I'm exactly where I belong, in my own house, living my own life, answering to no one but myself. And that, it turns out, is worth more than all the money in the world. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.